Good morning and welcome to the Pleasure for Health podcast. My name is Ailsa and I'm your host here. And today we're talking about creating safety in a relationship and potentially why that is so much harder than we think it should be. Most of the time, it's like, well, sure, I feel safe in this relationship. Sure, it's easy for me to talk about stuff with this is my partner or this is my best friend or this is someone I care about. But I am going to delve into a little bit more difficulties that arise around creating safety and the problems that come up with this. So things like you feel yourself holding back from your partner, you close off your feelings, you stop talking in the way that you would normally talk, and then potentially you start driving a wedge right in between you and the people that you love. And a lot of this starts from fear. So I really wanted to dive into this today. So welcome anyone who is here listening live, and if you're listening later, thanks for taking the time. You can always find out more about me on my website, pleasureforhealth.com, all about relationships. And so let's dive in. So when I talk about creating safety, most of us will remember a time, myself included, and I can tell you very recently, remembering a time where I said to my partner, "You don't make me feel safe," or "Your behavior makes me feel unsafe." I can hear myself saying that. I remember saying that. And there's potentially truth to that. And if you are in an abusive relationship or actually in physical or danger or sometimes emotional danger, it is actually true that the behavior around you is not safe for you. However, for many of us, I would say that the feeling of safety is not actually coming from anything that's happening in the present moment. And I just want us to stop and think about that for a moment before we get our hackles up about that. Are we safe in the present moment? Are we physically safe? Are we emotionally safe? Are we, psychologically safe in the present moment? And, right now I'm sitting here at my desk and I'm actually very safe. If I tell myself that there could be something scary about to happen, like somebody, there's a flood or there's a fire or something like that, I could easily start feeling unsafe in the present moment because of my fear of what might be happening in the future, even if it's in the very immediate future. If you are talking to a partner or your spouse and you feel in physical danger because they're angry and they're throwing things, that's an immediate danger. You are in danger. But if you are just worried about them losing their temper, but they haven't actually started throwing things or lost their temper, then it's you inside you that you're fearing something bad will happen. And that something bad will happen kind of feeling is actually fairly common for many of us. We have that anxiety, you could call it, like something could go wrong, like the shark music is playing. And, in neuropsychology, we call that, the shark music playing is your sympathetic nervous system, kind of going, da, da, na, like something bad is coming and I don't know what it is. And therefore it's even more scary because I don't even know what's coming, but I know something's coming and I know I'm in danger. And this shark music that kind of plays is often a response that is coming up from the past, potentially something we're experiencing now in a relationship reminds us of something that happened that hurt us in a past relationship, potentially all the way back to childhood or, in a previous intimate relationship or previous friendship. Oh, here it goes again. I was hurt before when somebody, didn't invite me to the party and I got hurt. And now I can imagine that everyone's getting invited but me. And now I'm thinking I'm going to get hurt again. And there's the shark music playing. And that's a very mild example. But the shark music comes up very quickly. For me personally, I do have this also in my relationship, and it did come up recently, and I'm still working with how much of this was actually present danger, real danger, and how much of it was created by my own nervous system shark music. And that's a really interesting question. And now, when I take some breaths and get in a different space and I can calm down and think about it, there was probably a bit of both. So that's what's really helpful to look at when we're really looking at creating safety. And so this brings me to the next point. And the next point is, can we expect other people to make us feel safe? You could say, well, if you sat down, I would feel more safe. If you keep your voice calm, I would feel more safe. If you aren't drinking, I would feel more safe. If you, if we have someone else, a third party in the room, I feel more safe. We could put all our safety points out there and say, if you or if they or if something out there was different, I would feel more safe. And potentially there's some truth to having an environment in which you feel safe. However, the real feeling of safety still has to come back to, am I feeling safe in my own body? Like, do I actually feel safe, or am I creating monsters in my head and then wanting people out around me to calm and take away the monsters? And they don't even know the monsters are there half the time. They don't know what my head is creating. If I'm sitting there having a conversation with my partner and he's raising his voice, and I'm thinking back to, oh, here we go, like, this is what happened before. Somebody started shouting and then things got broken and then I felt, whatever. He doesn't know that that's what's going through my head. All he knows is he got frustrated and raised his voice. And realistically, raising your voice, while not pleasant, is not going to put me in any kind of danger. At least that's for me. So, I could tell myself this in the present moment, I'm still safe. I don't want to talk to somebody who has a raised voice, and maybe I need to have a boundary around that. However, I'm feeling safe enough to stay present in my body and deal with the current system, rather than getting angry or out of fear, raising my voice and saying, you always get so angry and you make me feel da 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 da. So it's really interesting to look at this feeling of safety that we can create in our own body and in our own mind. So something that we could test ourselves with, this is just, if you just right now listening to this podcast, hopefully you're feeling safe enough while you're listening to the podcast, but just on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your tension level right now in your body? So, you're sitting there, maybe you're, listening to a podcast. What is your tension level right now? 0 to 10. And then, for me, it's like, I don't know, 2 or 3 maybe. Well, I'm doing the podcast, so that already puts a little more tension in my body. But hopefully for you listeners, you've got a fairly low tension level at the moment. Now imagine that you were in the woods and you're in the middle of the night. You have to get out of your tent and go, do your business in the woods. And you go out and you're trying to find a spot and you wander a little bit away from your tent. You do your business, and then the moon goes behind the clouds and it's suddenly really dark and you can't remember which way back to your tent, and your heart's racing and you start hearing things in the brush and you're not sure where to go, and it's super dark. You forgot to bring your flashlight, and you also didn't put your shoes on properly or your coat, and now you're kind of like, uh-oh. What would be your tension level just imagining that scenario? If you're like me, that would probably go up to like a 7 or 8, especially if I started hearing rustling in the bushes, because I can imagine scary creatures, just waiting to come out. Maybe there's a coyote or something like that hiding behind the bushes. and sneaking up on me. So um, my tension level would go up. Now, realistically, I am probably not in any danger. And especially if it turned out that the something rustling in the bush was my partner coming to look for me and be like, hey, are you okay? Just thought you might need your flashlight. Then I would be like, oh. So, and a question would be like, do you at that point where things are, you realize you didn't need to worry about anything and it was just your friend or your partner come with a flashlight, are you able to let go of that tension quickly, or does it stay with you for a while? So if you're anything like me, you probably like I keep tension in my body for quite a while actually. I have to purposely work on it, which is probably why I teach yoga and do these things. Because I do actually get tense and I stay tense because I'm like, okay, well this is my partner and whew, that was lucky, but I'm still tense because what if there's monsters out here as well or something. I'm not actually sure what my brain goes to, but something like that. So in my relationship, I often have times where I am afraid. I'm afraid of abandonment. My partner's like, well, I don't know if I can, sit and talk to you right now. It might be something pretty nonchalant, like I'm too busy to do that right now, or I've had a really hard day and I'm going to bed early. And I might have the fear come up about what if he never wants to spend time with me again and I'm stuck here, living a lie and we're no longer together. Like my brain can spin lots of stories out of that. And even just with my own story, let's say he went to bed early and I spun a whole story about that and our relationship and how it's all going to the dogs and we're never going to be together again and all of that. That tension that I built in my own self stays there potentially for a few days. I know that sounds quite strange, but that is actually what happens to many people is that fear that we created stays in our own body. And so it's interesting to notice how much we hold on to those fears and that tension because it then becomes cumulative, right? So if you had the next day, if you were just starting to calm down and then something else happened, it puts your anxiety or your fear up to another higher level. And you could just keep building tension that was really not about anything that was actually happening in the present moment. It was all fabricated fear about worries that might happen in the future, danger in the future. And this is more likely to happen, I would say, when we're chronically stressed out. And, raise your hand if you're chronically stressed out. Most of us are chronically stressed these days with way too much going on, too much information coming in, lots happening in the world that we have no control over or seemingly no control over. And there's lots of fear created in the world already, never mind in our personal relationships. So we're already going along with a lot of that underlying tension just hanging out and lots of stress. And so it doesn't take much for our imagination to suddenly be creating fears out of nothing or out of old memories or out of triggers. This is what a trigger is as well, is like something that reminds me of something that caused pain in the past and maybe will cause pain in my future, all of which is not happening in the present moment. I know, actually, I might have told this before in a podcast, but it was actually quite hilarious when my partner and I first started talking and we were doing long distance. And so we talked on the phone a lot. And it was interesting because at one point we were having this argument. I can't remember what the argument was about. It was not about anything really that important. But what we realized with our talking was that I was worried about something happening that would be similar to my past relationship. So I was bringing up the past and saying, this is what used to happen with my ex-husband. And I think you're doing the same thing, or this is heading in the same direction. And my current partner that was on the phone would be like, well, I'm worried that in the future, this will happen. And he had concerns about the future. And so he had worries and fears about the future. And, it was actually kind of funny because we realized that neither one of us was actually in the present moment. We actually had no issues in the present moment. One of us, I was afraid of what had happened in the past would repeat itself, and he was worried about something happening in the future that had never happened yet. And neither of us was actually, having an issue in the present moment. So when we realized that, and we sort of said, well, there is no problem right now, so why are we arguing about the potential problem in the future or the possible problem that's coming from the past? And so, we kind of let it drop. But it was really interesting how that happened. And so this fear can actually change the way we perceive situations. And so we want to create safety in both our mind, like this imagination that is, it's great to have an imagination, but it can really lead us astray as well. To really find a peaceful mind, which will take some breath work, potentially mindfulness, potentially looking at using our logical brain to say, is there any fear, something to be afraid of right now? Do I actually need to be afraid? Do I need to move away? Do I need to make a boundary? Do I need to, say something? Do I need to get out of this situation? Is there an actual issue that I need to be afraid of? And if there is, like, definitely act on that. But if there isn't, to tell our mind to take a holiday, go have cookies at grandma's house and just take a holiday and let us actually be present in the moment and take some breaths. And then our body also, if we've tensed up and we've got ready to fight or flee, and we've noticed we have all this tension, then moving around, shaking out, having a practice where we actually let the tension go from our body is also important in order to bring ourselves back into a more balanced nervous system state where we're not in our sympathetic nervous system. We're kind of more letting the parasympathetic nervous system, the kind of rest and digest, relax mode come into play. So it's very important to create both mental safety and physical safety. And relational safety might include saying, hey, I'm starting to feel unsafe I'm tense in my body. Something's up. Maybe I need a moment just to figure out what that is. Is that about me or is that about this situation? And, if we have an understanding and compassionate partner, they might be open to hearing how, if they come in talking loudly on the phone, that makes our nervous system jittery and we get nervous because we're not sure what the problem is. And then we're afraid and then we get angry with them and we're snappy. Like, we could say, hey, if you have an intense conversation you need to have on the phone, could you maybe finish that in the car first before you come in for dinner, type of thing. I mean, these kinds of things can definitely be worked out, but finding a way to create safety in our own self is super important in order to create more authentic intimacy. Because here's what I noticed, and this is a personal thing, we all have our own way, but we push people away when we feel unsafe. It's not a welcoming social engagement kind of place. We push people away because any other people around usually adds to our feeling of unsafety. And so we either push them away or we have kind of dropped into maybe a childhood need of you need to be like a parent to me right now, which, could be okay in an intimate relationship if we've really made that agreement that, I get scared during thunderstorms. I just need you to hold me. I mean, those kinds of things could be a part of your relationship, but they need to be kind of explicit and not so implicit. Because if we go into our childhood neediness and say, you're being scary right now, I need you to to make me feel safe, that's a lot of responsibility on our partner for something that is actually inside our own self. So that childlike need to have the other person respond in a certain way for us to feel safe doesn't lead to intimacy. It leads to that kind of parent-child sort of relationship. And every intimate relationship, we have moments of that. Hopefully, sometimes you're the parent, sometimes they're the parent, most of the time you're two actual adults having a conversation or an intimate moment. So it sounds like a lot of self-reflection, and it really is a lot of self-reflection. And it's really just a couple of things, like noticing if your mind is creating imaginary fears and noticing if there's tension in our body. Those two things will really clue you in as to when you're feeling unsafe. And when you notice that, then at least you can take a moment and say, what is it? Is there something in my current present moment that is unsafe for me? Or is this something that I'm creating in my head that is potentially in the future kind of unsafety that I could maybe let it drop? So I hope that gives you some ideas about safety and how important it is for all of us to be doing the work around how do we feel safe and creating um, that ability to discern when we are noticing that feeling of unsafety. So in a relationship, when we want to create new relationships and we've been burned in the past, this can be really important because there's going to be lots of triggers and ways that we are like, this doesn't feel safe. This happened to me before and it doesn't feel safe again. But you have to continue to, live in the present moment. And I know that's such a cliche thing to say and such a difficult thing to do, which is why all the sages and gurus and everything go on and on about it, because it really is a practice. So some kind of practice that brings you into the present moment is really helpful. And I personally do find things like yoga, like going for a walk, like being in nature. Maybe it's being creative and artistic. Having some kind of hobby that you do by yourself, preferably, that helps you be in the present moment, so that when you are with people that you love, you can bring that awareness to those relationships and hopefully create and foster wonderful, intimate moments and, moments of feeling safe with someone, because really, that is such a nurturing feeling when we can just be with someone that we feel safe with. You hear that very often. So I hope that gives you something to ponder on this rainy Monday morning. And I would love to have you join me again in my podcast. There's many other episodes. If you look up Pleasure for Health podcast, if you check out my website, ailsakepi.com. No, pleasureforhealth.com is my website where the podcast is. So you can check out that website and find all the old episodes. If you've really enjoyed this one, give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share and feel free to comment as well. And I hope you have a great day. All right.